This is a 1947 Lester MG. It was built in England by a fellow named Harry Lester, who built a series of sports racers based on the MG chassis and a chassis which he designed and built later on in the early 50s. This is one of, we believe, 6 that are built on an MG chassis. This one was built on a 38 MGTA chassis using a later, probably 47 MGTC engine. Harry was a very inventive fella and made a number of modifications which made the car more than competitive in its class. He was the first to be able to bore this engine out to 1500 cc's, which gave him a significant advantage. It's got an all-aluminum body over a tubular frame, saving probably 400 or 500 pounds of weight over the standard MG. It was modified a little bit later with telescopic shocks, Alphen brake drums, Barani wire wheels. These had been done basically in the early 50s. We'd been able to trace its history back to 54 when it was imported to the United States and was raced competitively by a number of drivers between 54 and the early 60s. It seems to have been lost for a while then, but surfaced again in the late 60s in a vintage race down in Texas. I bought it from a fellow in Chicago who had had it for about 15 years prior to my purchase, and I've owned it now for 3 years. It basically is running now the way it ran in the middle 50s. The engine has had no further modification, and I've done nothing to the body or the chassis. It's an excellent example of what racing would have been like in the 1930s. Not a lot of power. The car hops and skips over every jump, but you can really throw it around the track, and it's an awful lot of fun to drive.
What is it like driving a vintage racing car?
Slow.
I tell you, it's the only car I know that feels like 100 miles an hour or 30 miles an hour.
Basically, it handles completely differently than a modern day car. Very stiff suspension and a very supple chassis. And it was figured that that was the quickest way to get a car around a track. So there's a lot of chassis flex in it, and the body is built accordingly. The panels are all a little bit movable. So you feel and hear a lot of things that you never feel with a modern day car.
What about getting parts? Is that difficult?
That's one of the reasons that I bought this car specifically. All the parts are standard MG parts, and they're all available. I've had to do very little to it, but it had an engine rebuild, and the parts are essentially off the shelf. So one of the major factors in this car is that it's easy to maintain. The body comes apart very rapidly, and all the components are very simple and easy to work on. So it's a car that a person could maintain themselves without any difficulty at all.
How would you characterize the appeal of MGs? I mean, what is the attraction? What is the thing about MGs that makes so many people MG enthusiasts?
I think it's that they're basic, and I think what you'll find is that a lot of the people who run MGs do the work themselves. It's a car which is simple enough that it allows them to maintain it, modify it, play with it really a little bit, and not have to worry about some absolutely unobtainable part or something that's way beyond the abilities of really a backyard mechanic. I think that's probably its charm.
Do you own any other MGs?
No. I used to. I had an MGTC for a while. You know, it's the same kind of car, and on a track they're fun, but on the street they're awful. Very, very stiff, very hard riding cars, and not fun for a long drive. Although I think there are some MG enthusiasts here who would disagree. But
so your attraction is the racing side of it?
Absolutely, yeah. They're a lot of fun on the track. Very easy to control, and they're very forgiving. I mean, you make a slightly wrong turn into a corner here, and there's a lot of room for correction in it. Some of the modern, faster cars, there's no room at all. I've been racing a Lotus Formula car, and it just light years different. And those cars have very little margin for error, and that's really why the MG is so much fun.